Through the first 2 weeks, we've got a good idea of who's getting the ball and who isn't in certain passing offenses. And today, Jeff Bell and I, we're going to look through every single team, all 32 of them. We're going to look at how pass targets are distributed among these wide receivers. And Jeff, talk to me a little bit about this article that you've been doing. We did running backs last week. We're doing wide receivers this week. And then going forward, we'll kind of handpick the situations that we really want to talk about. But in order to do that, we kind of have to lay the baseline. So how is it that you break up different wide receiver rooms?
Yeah, so I break it into four different groups, really. And so we've talked before about the concept of clean offenses and dirty offenses. And really, what I'm trying to do is separate those out when it comes to passing volume. The first one is the top two options are over a 60% target share. That's where you're really looking for like two high end receivers. You usually get like, think about the Eagles, where it's AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, usually as the guys that are just way far ahead of the rest of the team. So that ends up being pretty small group when it gets down to it. The next one is the top two options are above 50%. So they're not quite to 60%, but then there's a third option that pushes it up to 70%. And these are all, I've been doing this for, I think, 4 years now. And it's all it kind of shakes itself out into neat little buckets where this one, you're kind of still a very targeted attack that's getting passed between three players and it's not being spread wide. Next one is players that there's one option over 25% target share, but the three options don't add up to 70%. And so that's where
Hmm.
you're kind of looking at it as you've got one solid receiver as the guy that is getting all that volume there. And then the rest of it's being spaced out kind of around the team. And that kind of identifies where there are situations where there's an alpha that is the receiver there. And then the other one is just kind of under all thresholds is just the catch-all where it doesn't fall into a neat category where, so really when you're looking at it, it's there two main targets here? Are there three main targets here? Is there one main target, or is this kind of just scatterbrained and kind of going in different directions?
And these will change as the season progresses. So you might hear us right now saying, like, why aren't the Cincinnati Bengals in this top one? Well, that's just because that's not the way the targets have been going through these first couple of weeks, and that will change over time. But let's dive through, starting with the first bucket that you talked about, offenses with two top options equaling above a 60% target share. I don't think we need to dive into these ones too much. Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua with the Los Angeles Rams, two certified alphas, no question there. The Philadelphia Eagles, we got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, both pulling a huge target share, albeit on a little tiny, teeny pie that isn't leading to much production. And then the Seattle Seahawks, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp, two guys just drawing immense amounts of targets here. And I will say that one is kind of heavily skewed by the target share that Jackson Smith-Njigba has pulled through these first few weeks. But Jeff, can we just kind of move on to the next one, or are there any of these three teams that you want to dig a little bit deeper into?
Well, just for context, I do change week to week. So it's kind of telling you what happened last week, where they shook out last week, and giving you an idea where they stand right now. Looking forward, injuries might impact something, or the
Mm.
other part of it too, I think, is volume. That I'm paying into the volume on this to make sure, letting you know how many team targets there are, because at the end of the day, fantasy football is a volume based game, and the more targets, the more volume. The less targets, fewer volume. So
So let's move on to the next one here. Then this is going to be offenses with two top options equaling above 50% and a top three option above 70% target share. So the Arizona Cardinals are the first one on here, and there might be a surprising name. I think a lot of people are going to think, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Michael Wilson, but Trey Benson, 24% target share in week two. I think that's worth discussing because Trey Benson was heavily involved last week as a pass catcher.
he was, and he's really taken over the running back three, or the third down running back role, not the running
Mhm.
back three, the third down back role. We talked about that last week when we broke down the backfields, but that played out into more passing volume this week. And the other part of it too is there's lower volume here. There's 25 targets for the Cardinals. And so that kind of gets skewed that Marvin Harrison Jr. can still land on this. But I think he's an interesting player to mention because the quotes from Jonathan Gannon coming out of the game is basically saying, hey, we need to get this guy the ball. We recognize that there's a problem here. And I think that a lot of people are panicked about Marvin Harrison Jr. right now. And the team doesn't always go to that level of saying, we recognize that something's not working here. We got to him the ball, especially when they're 2-0.
Yeah. And the week one usage was very promising, changed a little bit in week two. And I felt like that was a lot of what we saw last year. Like these games where it's like, okay, now this is what we want to see from Marvin Harrison Jr. and then kind of back on the shelf. So let's hope that he can string together a handful of consistent games here. Next one, we're going to talk about Cincinnati Bengals. We got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Andre Yosevach. Kind of this trio that puts them a part of this list. And Jamar Chase over 37% of the targets last week. T. Higgins and Yosevach not quite as involved. Now, how would you expect this offense to look in the Jake Browning era? I don't see him as a guy who's going to get through his progressions and spread the ball around. I see a lot of just dropping back and let me see if I can just force this ball to Jamar Chase, because I know if I was a quarterback, that's probably what I'd want to do.
The spiritual successor to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Jake Browning is a better quarterback than maybe a lot of people realize. We've seen
Uh-huh.
him for extended stretches, and he put some pretty good play out. And then he was kind of caught up in a contract situation that didn't allow him to explore the market. Because I think coming off 2023, the way he played, had he been able to go into the free agent market, he probably would have gotten an opportunity to be a starting quarterback. And it'll be interesting to see if he can parlay this. But when I look at backup quarterbacks, it's kind of you kind of have your guys where I'm confident they can still get the ball to the playmakers and still keep fantasy offenses afloat. And then there's like the disaster, the panic area. And I put Jake Browning in kind of more that Mac Jones level of backup quarterback, where I think Jake Browning's going to be able to get the ball to Chase Brown to Jamar Chase, and then also
Not Chase
to T
Brown, funny
Higgins as
enough.
well.
He
Yes,
does not check
apparently
down.
he does not get targets anymore, or never did. That was one of the offseason storylines, that Chase Brown would be more involved in the passing game. This hasn't manifested itself.
Yeah, and I think this one, let me ask you real quickly too. Jake Browning, do you think that he's worth a pickup? By the time this episode airs, waivers will have run for a lot of people. But do you think, like, even in a one quarterback league, are you intrigued by Jake Browning at all?
In a one quarterback league, I'm not quite there yet. I know that we've been pretty decimated at quarterback. I mean, I could
And that's
maybe
that's
think
why,
about it,
yeah.
but an aggressive as super flex league, I would be very aggressive if he's available on the waiver in super flex league.
Yeah, somebody asked me today what to spend on Browning in a redraft super flex league. And I said around 30%. And like I don't think that's crazy. I don't like spending a ton of my fab too early. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy who's going to be starting almost the entire season and throwing to some of the best receivers in the league. Houston Texans, Nico Collins pulled over a 40% target share last night. Love to see that. And I say last night, we're recording on Tuesday evening. I don't know when this episode's coming out. It might be days from now by the time you see this one. But Nico Collins, and then we saw Dalton Schultz and Xavier Hutchison combining for some targets as well. I do want to see a little bit more Jalen Noel. He looked really good, but we've got Christian Kirk now expected to come back in week 3. So I'd imagine that this one is probably going to change coming out of week 3 once we see Christian Kirk out there, right, Jeff?
Yeah, their willingness to play, because they've played Jaden Higgins. We saw one big explosive play out of Jaden Higgins. We saw at the return game Jalen
Yep.
Noel making big plays there. Xavier Hutchinson, I think they like his blocking there. To me, I was a little bit surprised at this one because it didn't feel like Nico Collins was getting the ball at all, and to see that he did get 9 targets out of this, but and then the passing volume was probably lower than what I expected to, with just 22 targets. Watching the game last night, the feel on it didn't feel like it was a 22 target game that half of them are going to Nico Collins, but at the same time, CJ Stroud was really struggling with the pressure last night.
Is there like anything more frustrating than seeing your stud wide receiver like catch a big touchdown on the first drive and you're just like, yes, it's gonna be one of those games, and then it isn't. That's it. That's pretty much it for the entire game. Miami Dolphins, Devon Achan and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, all near or above a 20% target share in this matchup. Devon Achan actually leading the bunch, 10 targets. That was a career high for him. But then we saw Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle seeing 7 and 6 targets as well. No surprise here. Like, this is where almost all the targets in this offense are getting funneled to, right?
Yeah, that's what we've seen a couple of years ago when we did have a very good offense in Miami, just funneling the targets to the main receivers. That we didn't have Devon Achan really on that team as a target earner the way that he is now. And so that kind of changes the conversation a little bit. It was nice to see, with all the negative talk around the Dolphins, that they did have a good performance here. And I think it's noteworthy that for as many struggles as there were last year, between week 11 and week 15, Tua Tagovailoa was the quarterback 2 overall for a solid month there. And the other part of it, I did laugh a little bit. If you saw the comment about how Tyreek Hill was upset that he was underthrown a little bit, and Tua kind of told him, I'm not going to be able to hit you on the 80-yard play. You're going to have to just kind of wait, turn around and wait, come back for the ball.
I feel like the theme for Tua Tagovailoa this offseason has just been like maybe too honest. Did you hear him in his press conference today when he was like, "That Josh Allen, man, I can't do half the things that he can do." It's like, all right, dude, like give yourself a little bit more credit and let's not build up your opponent too much. But gotta love the self awareness there. Continuing to move down in this bucket here, we've got the Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Naylor, and TJ Hawkinson, 6, 5, and 3 targets here. TJ Hawkinson, I think, is the one that I want to talk about because he has looked bad these first couple of weeks. And JJ McCarthy hasn't been doing the offense any favors as well. But now with Carson Wentz expected to get the start for week 3, maybe week 4, week 5, week 6, we'll see kind of what happens after this. But do you maybe have a little bit more faith in TJ Hawkinson bouncing back? Or do you think that maybe it's just him and his play that is negatively impacting what we're seeing out there?
I think it's both. I think that if you were watch the tape, I don't know that TJ Hawkins is necessarily running downfield free and open. I don't think he's really getting open. But then at the same time, JJ McCarthy is just not allowing anything to work out. I think that Atlanta's defense is a little bit better than maybe we expected. A lot of people expected. Jeff Ulbrich, the defense coordinator there, brings a lot of different exotic blitzes, and they were getting home on JJ McCarthy on Sunday night. I think for Wentz, I want to see if he's able to get Justin Jefferson going, because Justin Jefferson, he
Mhm.
had a touchdown in week 1, kind of saved that week a little bit. And then he had the big play right before halftime last week, but it kind of get him to 81 yards. But at the same time, on 3 receptions, this is the first time since beginning of last year that he's gone back-to-back games with less than 5 receptions. So
And this is the first time in recent memory that Kevin O'Connell's offense has not looked great. I mean, maybe we just kind of overestimated the ability that, like, it doesn't matter. You can drop anybody in that offense. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. And now all of a sudden, this offense is looking a bit mortal.
I want to say too, Jalen Naylor played 100% of the snaps,
Yeah,
and for all the attention around Adam Thielen, it does seem like Jalen Naylor has that wide receiver 3 job locked down, because we've got one more game and we're going to be getting Jordan Addison back
right.
into this offense too, and that's
That makes me
probably.
think that Thielen isn't even going to like see the field once Jordan Addison comes
No,
back,
I
right?
I think Thielen is droppable in redraft leagues. If you're holding him in a redraft league, I think you can comfortably drop Adam Thielen at this point. And yeah, you wouldn't think that Thielen would see the field very often if Naylor is locked into the receiving rotation above him, and then you're adding Addison. But you talk about Hawkinson. Hawkinson can't get going in this situation, and then you're going to add Jordan Addison back in. And
Mhm.
I mean, Kevin O'Connell, you would think is going to figure it out at some point, but who knows?
Let's move down to the next team, the New Orleans Saints. We've got Chris Olave with a whopping 10 targets, Juwan Johnson with 9 targets. I mean, this is they threw the ball a lot in this game, and then Alvin Kamara coming down with 6 targets as well. But man, I can't ignore the connection that is brewing between Spencer Rattler and Juwan Johnson. This is back-to-back games now where Juwan Johnson has looked really good. He is leading all tight ends in targets and second in catches behind only Jake Ferguson. I mean, is this the real deal? Like, as long as Spencer Rattler's starting, are we just looking at Juwan Johnson as a plug and play tight end?
Right now, it definitely feels like we are, and I think
Right.
the one of the most fascinating things is that their pace is up. They are one of the, I think they're maybe 5th in the league in plays per game through 2 games, but they, if you've got a quarterback like Spencer Rattler, the intuition would be, let's slow it down a little bit. Let's kind of maybe try to minimize plays. Let's try to keep games close. And they're going the opposite direction. They're going pretty fast. And we've seen Rattler through 2 games, because the Rashid Shaheed isn't on this because the target volume wasn't there, but he got in the end zone. And
Hmm.
so you look at, if you had faith and were willing to buy at a discounted ADP, all these targets in New Orleans, they all had good games this past week, and you've been rewarded.
I want to talk about the New York Giants as well, and this is one that I think we could spend. We've been moving kind of rapid pace through these teams so far, but this is one of the most intriguing passing offenses to me right now. Malik Neighbors doing what Malik Neighbors does: 13 targets, 9 receptions, 167 yards, 2 touchdowns that were both just like poster worthy, like just spectacular plays, and kind of gotta love that. Like late in the game, Russell Wilson's mindset is just like, I'm just going to huck that ball as far as I can downfield and hope that Malik Neighbors can make a play. And I got to say, it's not a bad strategy when you got Malik Neighbors because he's going to make plays. But Wan'Dale Robinson is the one that really jumps out to me. Saw 10 targets, nothing surprising about that. But it was the quality of the targets that changed dramatically. Like all we've seen since Wan'Dale Robinson has come into the league is this dink and dunk type of role where they're using him at near the line of scrimmage. And it seems like this week, the volume maintained, but he was running a lot of the routes that we see typically reserved for Darius Slayton. So a huge change in Wan'Dale Robinson's role, but much more in line with the type of player that he was in Kentucky. Do you think this is just kind of a fluky one-off sort of game, or are they just going to be running this all verts offense? They got Russell Wilson there.
I don't think they get to play the Dallas Cowboys every week, so that might be a big part of it. And I don't know. I think the Cowboys might be one of the worst defenses in football without Micah Parsons on the field. But it's kind of similar but different vibes in Miami, where Miami, it's like you see the Mike McDaniel's just got the sad press conferences and looks like he's kind of just waiting any day to be called into the office. It feels like for the Giants, Brian Dable's like, hey, we're going out guns blazing. And I think too, you're looking at personnel, and when you had Daniel Jones as your quarterback, when you have Tommy DeVito as your quarterback, and then you turn around and you get Russell Wilson. We know the famous moon balls from Russell Wilson. You have Jameis Winston. He's able to go vertical. Jackson Dart is able to go vertical. It does feel like they looked at that. They completely overhauled that quarterback room, and it looked like what they had. They recognized what they had in the room last year, where we had
Mhm.
so many of those targets close to the line of scrimmage for both Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, and said, hey, let's go a complete other direction. Let's attack vertically. Let's go downfield. And it's really exciting because I think Robinson has that skill set within his game. And some of it's too, it's tough like them in Cincinnati. Some of these teams fall right under that 60% threshold for their top two targets. And you're kind of sitting there like, so fuzz the math a little bit to push them up into this tier, or do we leave them in this tier? So I think
Yeah,
that's
count
part
that
of
one
what
that
goes
was
into
thrown
it
at Tyrone
as well.
Tracy's feet as a throwaway instead of a target, so we can get this up there because it does feel like it's really just
Yeah,
Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, and like nobody else
it
really
does.
matters unless Tyrone Tracy can score a touchdown. Of course, you're feeling good about it, but a split backfield, no real tight end emerging, no real wide receiver three. It feels like it is just Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson. Start Malik Neighbors as an elite wide receiver one, and Wan'Dale Robinson. Flex consideration, I feel like almost undersells what he's done so far this year. Like he's playing like a wide receiver too.
Well, and the other part too, I want to capture the volume, and so I think that it feels so disingenuous to say something like AJ Brown has a 38% target share. And it's like, okay, he's got less targets than Trey Benson. Like, what's going on here? Like, type thing of like off that target share, or like less targets than like Jalen Naylor, like some of these other players, or like that might be Jawan Johnson getting more targets than AJ Brown. So I think it's two sides of it, because I feel like I so often the numbers that I see are like a ratio or something, and it's like that's fine, but you're not telling me the other side of that ratio. You're not telling me that they're not throwing the ball, and while he's got 38% targets, that doesn't play into volume very well.
Yeah, I am with you. And I had to fact check you on the AJ Brown, Trey Benson. It's close.
Trey Benson did
AJ
not have
Brown,
more targets then, but
AJ
you
Brown on
believed
the
me though
season.
for a second.
I looked it up, and on the season, AJ Brown has one more target than Trey Benson. So, whoo, if if those tides swing a little bit in week three, that'll be a fun tweet to fire off. All right, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the last team that we're going to talk about in this bucket here, and Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka with 11 and 7 targets, and then Bucky Irving coming through with 6 targets as well. We did see a little bit of a change in that backfield usage where Rashad White got a lot of the late game touches, looked re-energized, fresh legs, but Bucky Irving had a lot more of the passing down work. It almost feels like the roles from last year may have flip-flopped a little bit, but let's talk about this one a little bit. I mean, Mike Evans still the clear number one target here, but Emeka Egbuka has really been ripping off these big plays, and that's where a lot of his fantasy value has come from, even on a slightly smaller target share.
Yeah, so and that's the tough thing when you're just looking at raw numbers on a sheet, and I try very hard to provide context for those numbers because if you're to look and see, well, 6 targets for Bucky Irving, almost 20% target share, awesome. But if you watch the game, almost all of those were in the 2-minute scramble drill because the Texans were sitting back in prevent defense, trying to make the Bucks spend the entire clock to go down the field. And I think he had 4 receptions in that window there. And
Mhm.
and so it was simply Baker Mayfield seeing where the defense stood and saying, well, I'll just dump it down to Bucky Irving and he'll beat this one linebacker that's already that's behind him and get 15 yards here. And so it's the type of thing of like the raw numbers. Bucky Irving, very involved in the passing game. You watch the game, he wasn't involved in the passing game all day long until the very end of it. And so, like, how do you it's so much of I think the passing game, and probably one of the reasons why I do lean into maybe flipping a little bit week to week is just to show the picture of what happened last week, but also providing the context of why it happened and to say, is this something that's sustainable that we should expect, or is this a situation where we think the Bucks are a pretty good team? We don't know how many scramble drills are going to be in, and is this simply just the product of what the defense gave them in that situation?
So I want to talk about this next bucket here. Like we're down to category number 3 now, if you
I want
will.
to say
And this,
too,
yeah,
quick.
yeah.
There's a lot of panic about rookies right now, but thank God we have Emeka Buka's 29 yards to ease that panic on the rookies everywhere. But no, I
Dude,
mean, 3 big plays, 3 touchdowns. So
it's so funny to be seeing the panic right now. I mean, that's what we should have done is like an episode today, just like how much are we panicking about these rookies, so we could just sit here and say we're not panicking about no, we're not. Like week 2, I don't know what's going on. I feel like the fantasy football, just the way that like media is being consumed and talk about has changed so much this year. I don't know. Like I don't know if this is the show to have this discussion either. I know we've got a lot of other things to discuss, but like people are so overreactionary this year. It's been really kind of weird. Like we know it. Like even Alfredo Brown and I on the fantasy football show are redraft focused. Like we talk about exercising patience with rookies all the time, and here we are. Like to me, like Ashton Jinty looked great. Like the contact balance, all those things. Like, sure, there's offensive line problems. We knew that when we drafted him. Amari Hampton, I think, has looked spectacular. I think Tedero McMillan has looked like, a top 10, top 15 wide receiver so far. But because he hasn't scored a touchdown, and because Ashton Jinty hasn't scored a touchdown, and because Omari Hampton ceded some late work to Najee Harris, like people are just panicking with their hair on fire. It's weird, Jeff. It's really, really weird.
well, and so I write an article on Monday called The Roundup, where I really try to capture what happened over the weekend and maybe get ahead of some of these storylines. And as part of that, I have a feature I call the landmine lineup, where basically, like, if you were just had all of the high ranked players that just laid an egg, like this is kind of tells you where it stands. And it was completely loaded with rookies this week.
Yeah.
And so when I did that, I wanted to say, like, this is what Bucky Irving did last year, and remember what he did at the end of the year, and this is what Brian Thomas. But they had good games in the first 2 weeks, and some of these rookies that we're seeing haven't had good games in the first 2 weeks, and so I think that that's an interesting thing to talk about because we knew last year's rookie class was very special at wide receiver. We knew that. We knew with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Malik Neighbors, with Roma Dunze, who had a disappointing rookie year, that it was a very special receiver class. We saw this year Ted McMillan going top 10, and then Emeka Ibuka didn't go until to the 20s, and that was pretty much it when it came to the wide receivers. And so we've got that. We know the running back depth of this class was pretty solid, but we also know that the tight ends weren't Brock Bowers. I mean, Tyler Warren has probably been the best rookie out of anybody, and Colson Loveland going there, but it also wasn't Brock Bowers. So it's the type of thing of we knew this was a down class, and in fine in some areas, but I think that when you look at the top of the class, I think that you can make an argument that like an Abdul Carter might be pick 6 or 7 in a more robust class. And we knew last year's class was absolutely loaded. And so I think the other side of it too, especially from a redraft side, is we've heard so often that rookies are league winners. And it was not that long ago that a rookie Garrett Wilson or a rookie Chris Olave was going in like round 10 or 11 in redraft leagues. It was historic. It was comically late how late rookies were going
Like
not
first
that
round
long
wide
ago.
receivers going late in
Right.
drafts, right?
And since then,
I mean,
it's
Tyrell
just been
McMillan was going
pushing
round
him.
3. Ginty
Yeah.
was going round 1. Like, all of these guys were getting really steamed up. Hampton was going at the 2-3 turns. So, like, the expectations, as you talk about, like the curse of expectations, people had expectations like, wait, I drafted this guy over Kyron Williams. Why isn't he performing like Kyron Williams? Well,
Yes.
probably should have done
Yeah,
that.
and yeah, and I think the market, I think you talk about everybody being so reactive, but I think the market has been so reactive over the last couple of years in ADP because we saw a big push out of really nowhere to zero RB. And the ironic thing of it, I pushed back hard on that last year because like, we have talked on the running back show last week how this transition towards bell cow usage has happened. And like in concert with that, like the ADP moved the exact opposite of like the way that it should, whereas there was a long stretch where it was all running backs at the top of the draft. And so it's like it's being so reactive that it's not actually reacting to what's happening. It's reacting to like what we think is happening, and it's just being wrong. And I think that I, rookies probably are going too early in drafts this year, in redrafts this year, and you're stuck in a tough spot because had a guy like I mean, Ashton Genty, I think there's probably a fair argument, but had he been a third round pick or a fourth round pick, which we've seen in the past, there were
Right.
rookies with his profile that were third round picks. You've got two anchors, first round picks on your roster. You can stomach a slower start there, but some of it's too the conversation about the push to week 17 is you're not playing in week 17 if you're not getting any scores early in the season.
I saw Frank Amirandi, a friend of us, he tweeted today, he's like, there's so much talk about all of these league winning rookies. Well, if you invested really heavily in rookies, good luck winning your league because you're already 0-2. And I think that just like so succinctly kind of puts a bow on that conversation. Come for the wide receiver room conversations and stay for the tangents on
We were
rookie
moving so
markets.
fast that we had to have a 5-minute tangent about nothing. So
Little break check there. All right, back on track. So when you look at this one, Jeff, offenses with one top option who's pulling a 25% target share and the top 3 below a 75% share, would you say this qualifies as like a semi clean offense with a top dog? Like, am I kind of
yeah, I
saying
think
that
that's the
correctly?
target. Yeah, that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for a number one receiver right now, and it's probably more actually. It's got its clear top dog, but it's probably a little bit more of a dirty offense in terms of there's not 3 guys that are pushing it up above a 70% threshold. It's just being spread all around, but there is a clear top guy.
So let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens, who I think a lot of people assume this is going to be a very dirty offense, but we are seeing Zay Flowers emerge as that top guy. A 39% target share last week, but still 42% target share on the season. We're seeing some crumbs left there for Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews and Justice Hill and whoever else. But like, this is very clearly the Zay Flowers show. And shout out to you, Jeff, when we did our My Guys episode right before the season kicked off. You talked about Zay Flowers and you kind of saw the writing on the wall. And now here he is on pace for just a career year.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at when you've got an offense like the Ravens and you've got an RPO heavy offense, you can kind of keep it, pull it, give it to Derrick Henry. But off that read on an RPO, it's really tough to go through progressions because you've spent so much of the play allowing the RPO option to develop. And so often of it, it has to be a pull and then throw it to your primary. And I think that Zay Flowers has really stepped up into that role. And they're now in year 2 with Derrick Henry, Todd Monken's in year 2 of having this personnel. And it's moved from a lot more of a let's let Lamar Jackson run around and do his thing to we've got Derrick Henry. We know how that works. And they had that offseason to plan and to build around this, but they also had the showcase of Zay Flowers of him developing last year. And now they can say we
Mhm.
can do more with Zay Flowers. We can attack in more areas with Zay Flowers. And this is kind of a red flag, I think, for everybody outside of Zay Flowers. and Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in this offense, and an offense last year that the passing volume, 40 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson, allowed Rashad Bateman to be a piece, or allowed Mark Andrews to be a piece. And now you really have it focused on three guys.
Chicago Bears, a very similar offense where the ball is kind of spread thin among everybody, but we have the very clear top dog here in Roma Dunze, who pulled 1/3 of the targets on Sunday, 11 targets on the day. He is now the wide receiver 3 in fantasy scoring, like just off to a blistering hot start. Do you think this is going to maintain, Jeff? Do you think that Roma Dunze has just kind of pulled away as the clear top guy here in Chicago?
Well, I feel like I should be asking you this question because you are our
Yes, I
resident
do.
Bears expert, but I absolutely think that it will, because we
I
know
think
the
DJ Moore's gone.
rapport between.
I think DJ Moore is getting traded. I think he's no longer a part of the big picture plans.
Yeah, would you? You're still pretty bullish on Luther Burden, are you not?
Not really.
Backing
I
off a bit.
tweeted out yesterday and I wrote it in my article as well. I think Chicago has bigger issues right now than developing developmental rookies. And that's what Colson Loveland is. And that's what Luther Burden is. Like these guys are not pro ready players. Like they need time and they need patience. And had a little back and forth with Matt Harmon yesterday where we were talking about this. And we're like, this is the issue when a team that is in the midst of a rebuild spends luxury picks on tight ends and wide receivers when they already have tight ends and wide receivers. They aren't getting reps, they aren't developing, and the holes on the team are rearing their ugly head every single week. So I mean, just what was fun at the time because we're like, ooh, Ben Johnson, all these new toys. This is going to be so much fun. And then we're like, oh, that's right. We don't have a left tackle and we don't have a linebacker and we don't have a defensive line. And now all of these other issues that we should have addressed are now showing up. So I do have some pause on Luther Burden because the role that we want him to take over, this slot role in Ben Johnson's offense, we know is a very cerebral role. You know, Olamide Zaccheaus is running choice routes, finding the soft spots in zones. And I think if you scheme up touches for Luther Burden, he can do a lot with them. But I don't think he's a guy out there or a guy who could just go out there, play 90% of the snaps and do the right thing on every single play. So I'm panicking, hair on fire when it comes to Luther Burden and Colson Loveland right now.
Okay. But I do think that Roman, I think so much has gone into the development of the conversation around the development of Caleb Williams. And will Caleb Williams be what we thought? That I think people have kind of missed that Roman Dunze is exactly what we thought as the number one receiver there. And I got him in a couple spots in Dynasty this offseason. I'm pretty thrilled with that after what we've seen these first couple games. I would say that even in a rebuild, I think wide receiver and even tight end at this point are blue chip cornerstone pieces. So
Mhm.
I struggle to call them a luxury pick when I think if you're looking the long view, like you said, DJ Moore's probably not long for Chicago, and Cole Kmet, who knows there. So I don't know that I view them as luxury picks, but at the same time, it's we need to have a peace treaty here between the Patriots and the Bears, and let's figure out a way to let the Bears have the Travion Henderson that they desperately wanted, and then you've got the Patriots that they got
Desperately need
Keyshawn
Luther Burden.
Boutte,
Yeah.
but he only had one target, but they could really use Luther Burden if Pop Douglas isn't there, they could really use that kind of guy in their offense, and we should have that facilitate that and make that happen here.
I could just hear Ryan Bowles on the phone now. Hey, remember when I called you guys in April, wondering if maybe we could reopen that discussion because I know they were trying to move up at the time and it didn't work out. Denver Broncos. We got a clear top dog here, and as we all expected, Troy Franklin with 9 targets on the day. Jeff, I want to talk about this one because it's
Yeah.
not just the target volume; it is the routes that he was running. I am very intrigued. This is not what we expected from Troy Franklin. This guy is a burner, an outside threat, a guy who can get behind defenses. But we saw him. I'm going to pause before I say this in Michael Thomas's role, like just running slants, catching the ball across the middle of the field, making plays after the catch. Not something that I would have expected to see from Troy Franklin, but my goodness, he looked spectacular in that role. And I hope this is a sign of things to come because I really liked what I saw.
It's interesting to me that, and I think that I don't think that you're wrong in that classification of people viewing him as a burner. But when you watched his tape at Oregon, so much of what he did with Bo Nix in Oregon was exactly what he's doing now, where it's let's get him the ball and allow him to create after the catch. Let's get him the ball on the move in short to intermediate game and allow him to run after the catch and do that. And if you're looking at the wide receivers that they have here, outside of maybe arguably Marvin Mims, who also has kind of been more that vertical threat his entire
Mhm.
career. Cortland Sutton, the skill set to give him the ball and run after the catch isn't exactly Cortland Sutton's game. It's definitely not Pat Bryant's game. And so that's Troy Franklin's game kind of to a T a little bit. And this is, I think, maybe the most notable thing that we saw from the entire weekend when it comes to early reveals and looking for players that can get high heavy volume in some of these ambiguous passing attacks. We saw, I know our dear friend, our mentor, Cecil Lammy out there with the Broncos took him in the Fessel OG League, and he was talking about how he's the wide receiver 2 for this
Mhm.
Broncos offense. And that's what we've seen through 2 games here, but it makes sense when you look at the makeup of their receiver room and their skill set. And I think that there are red flags all over the place in this offense outside of Troy Franklin, and imagine Sutton will probably have better games. But I mean, people were way in on Pat Bryant in redraft leagues. I think we're lays off from that happening. People were really in on Marvin Mims, and that feels like he's a part-time player that's just never really going to move past that role. And then Evan Ingram was a tight end 1 for so many people, and right now he's playing 30% of the snaps, and they're using the run blocking tight end Adam Troutman. They're using all the pieces. They're being very versatile with their
Lucas
offensive
Kroll
scheme.
got a touchdown, I believe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when
So
you talk about Franklin, the things that Franklin did, that's the things that we thought Evan Ingram was going to do, and is Franklin doing it?
So we're going kind of rapid, and I talked about that in my article where like he locked down that slot role. We're going rapid fire through these. Haven't really given like much actionable advice, but with Evan Ingram, want to talk about this real quickly? Like selling for a third. Like I'm not typically a big fan of like selling low, but I don't know, man. Like I don't see Evan Ingram. His
I
best
don't.
days are behind him. Like he was forced volume in Jacksonville, and this offense right here. I don't know if you're ever going to feel good about putting him in your lineup.
Yeah, and I feel like selling for a third, sure, but also I like to target the backup running backs, especially in season. Somebody's backup running back, like I'll give you Evan Ingram for like a random like Ray Davis or something like that, where it's
Mhm.
like,
Yeah,
the person's like, what do I have a Ray Davis here?
Blake
But we
Corum.
know, yeah, it's the type of thing of like they're not seeing immediate. I love to target backup running backs during the season because there's always that window that they could become the starter during the season, but also the person is seeing them on their bench and thinking in their mind like, well, I'm not putting them in my lineup. And so it's the type of thing of like, I'm pretty desperate at tight end here. I'm not putting Ray Davis into my lineup, but Evan Ingram, maybe I'm still plugging him in. It might turn around.
Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the clear top dog in this offensive game plan. Nearly 40% of the targets. Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta with 4 targets each, right around 14% target share. However, Jameson Williams on just 2 catches had almost just as much yardage as Amon-Ra St. Brown had on 9 catches. And Jeff, I mean, this just corroborates everything that we talked about this offseason that, like, you don't need a lot of volume going Jameson Williams' direction. He is so efficient with the touches that he gets that even if he has half the target share, he can still put up similar production. And yeah, the touchdowns were very skewed in Amon Ra's favor, but this is kind of exactly what we expected this offense to look like, right?
It really is, and I mean, I expected a little bit more volume for Jameson Williams, but it was nice to see the Lions get rolling. And I think so much of the Week 1 conversation was on that poor effort offensively and attributing that to the loss of Ben Johnson. When I think in reality we need to be attributing that to the Green Bay Packers being a stay
Maybe the
away
best
red flag
defense in the
defense.
league.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Speaking of the Green Bay Packers, top dog there this week was Tucker Kraft, about 26% of the targets. Dontavian Wicks was second with 6 targets, then Romeo Dubs with 5 targets. So this is one of those like kind of borderline ones where you talk about like fudging the numbers a little bit. This is really close to just being a dirty offense that's spread all over, but Tucker Kraft just barely cracked that 25% threshold. This is one where I was very interested by what we saw from Tucker Kraft, kind of dove into the film a little bit. And I don't want to say concerns. I have a lot of the same concerns that Matt Waldman has, but I don't really care all that much because to put it like Matt Waldman, his concerns, he struggles with beating man coverage. He's not the best route runner, but He's playing with Matt LaFleur, and Matt LaFleur just does such a great job of setting him up. Like the first catch of the day, it's just like a play action. And something that Tucker Craft is really, really good at is selling the play action as a blocker. Like he fully engages his guy, acts like he's trying to push him out of the way, and then just releases, and boom, he's in the flat, nothing but green space in front of him. And they run that play often, and it doesn't seem like any team has an answer for it yet. So, yeah, well, you can like nitpick his route running and some other things of that nature. I think that he is just in a role that is tailor made to let him do exactly what he does best, which is catch the ball, get a full head of steam, and just run through the defense.
Yeah, I should it's tough to have the numbers in my head that I want loaded up to give you exact numbers, but I know last year it was something like only 8 players had 2 plays of over 50 receiving yards or something to that effect. And it was like your Jamar Chases, your Brian Thomas, like all the explosive receivers you would think, and then Tucker Craft. And
Right.
and we saw another one against the Commanders where it's like the defense just forgets that Tucker Craft is on the field and he just runs down the field by himself basically. And that's, I mean, over almost half the volume that he accumulated in this game came on that one play where it was clearly a bust. So something was broken there, allowed Tucker Craft to get out. This is kind of, it's just treading the line on, do they make him a number one receiver option for them? If they do that, do those concerns that you mentioned show up?
I think that's the fear, of course, but like even that, I went back because like I'm fascinated by Tucker Craft because he's such an interesting player. And that 57-yard play that you talk about, I watched it a few times. It was just beautiful play design and like just like
Yeah.
taking advantage of a situational moment where it's like 2nd and 6. They come out in 13 personnel where they've got 3 tight ends out there. Like Savion Williams is the lone run or wide receiver in this lineup. So like you think all signs are pointing like this is going to be a run. And then they put Savion Williams in motion and can see that the defense is in a zone. They fake the handoff to Josh Jacobs. And basically all Tucker Craft did is after Savion Williams comes across in motion and then goes on a straight vertical route, Tucker Craft just kind of trailed like 10 yards behind him. So as the zone coverage is moving in Savion Williams' direction, as soon as Tucker Craft realizes that he split 2 defenders, he turns around and Jordan Love just put it right on him. So like a beautiful play design, great situational awareness from Tucker Craft, and then an amazing throw from Jordan Love. And that's why, like, sure, like he's not out there beating man coverage and doing the things that a lot of other elite tight ends do, but like just a part of a very good offense with a smart coach that knows how to maximize his skill set. In my rest of the season rankings that I just did, I moved Tucker Craft all the way up to tight end 4. Like for me, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, and then after that, Tucker Craft. And I think that if you're having the dynasty discussion, then you could throw Colson Loveland, maybe TJ Hawkinson in there. But like at this point, I think it's more of an indictment on the tight end market as a whole. But I don't see how you can keep Tucker Craft out of the top 5, top 6 discussion.
Ooh, I wanted to see. Let's see here. Talk about something, Dave, because I want to look something up.
You had 3. I was just going on and on about like this one play that I was just diving
No,
into
and
before
it
you
just
wrote it. I don't know what
clicked.
else I could talk about now. But yeah,
I
Tucker
no,
Craft.
I'm trying to look
Oh,
up dynasty value for, okay. I mean, he's tight end 5 in dynasty because,
all right.
yeah, and TJ Hawkinson's tight end 9. Because I was thinking about like a pivot, but you talk about the market being so reactive. But I mean, Tucker Craft is up to tight end 5 in dynasty now, right now, which again feeds into that market being so reactive. And again, it's an island game. It's week 2. When you look at where the scores stand right now, we haven't really gotten a dud out of Tucker Craft because he had that week 1 touchdown. So
Yep.
it makes some level of sense. Maybe lacks a lot of nuance, but makes some sense.
Jacksonville Jaguars, we got Brian Thomas as the clear alpha receiver in this offense with 12 targets. Yeah, sure, he only caught 4 of them for 49 and scoreless yards, but pulled a lot of targets in this game. Diami Brown, 5 targets, or I'm sorry, 7 targets, and then 6 going to Travis Hunter. So this Jeff, as a heavy Travis Hunter drafter, this was a nightmare watching this game. Played a higher rate and more overall snaps on defense than he did on offense. And it's weird. I've seen a lot of people like nitpicking what he did on the defensive side of the ball. I'm far from like a defensive back scout, but I saw him passing or breaking up pass attempts. And I think that's like what he was supposed to do. Like, he's not a tackler. He's not going to be jamming the A gap. Like he is going to be out there leaning on his ball skills to make plays and break up passes. And that's what he did. So, I hope that we get, just like Liam Cohen told us in week 1 that he was going to be mostly an offensive player. And then going into week 2, he said we need to get him more snaps on defense. I'm hoping that he just continues to be honest with us. And when he says, hey, it's going to be a defensive game, you bench Travis Hunter. And when he says, hey, he's going to be on offense this week, you start Travis Hunter. I hope it's as simple as that. But I know that coaches like to play it coy, and I could see this changing as the season goes on.
I think there's two things at play here. Is we talk about Brian Thomas, and Brian Thomas did not have the very best game, but maybe Brian Thomas bounces back in the next game. But Diami Brown had a good game, and Parker Washington had a good
Yeah.
game. And on the defensive side, multiple cornerbacks are injured for the Jaguars, are playing through injury right now. And the problem, the rub of Travis Hunter in fantasy is that because of his versatility, if you're down corners, you're going to play him at corner, and you're just stuck there. If you were to Brian Thomas were to be injured, you'd probably see him dominate on offense. And so the wide receiver room is better right now, and it's healthier right now. And Travis Hunter, as you're getting him up to speed and acclimated, the organization has said, everybody knows it, that Travis Hunter is a better defensive back than wide receiver right now. And you want to think like, well, that means they'll give the developmental time at wide receiver. And some of it's, we want this rookie to succeed. We want him to feel confident. We use the number 2 overall pick in the draft on him. We're going to let him be a star cornerback, and we're going to get him some snaps on offense. And I think like right now that might be where the lean is.
Moving to the Las Vegas Raiders, Jacoby Myers was the target leader here with 12 targets, a good game with 6 catches for 68 yards. Brock Bowers, playing with this big, bulky knee brace, did not look like himself at all. So I think this is one that we're probably going to see in most weeks, moving up into the group that we discussed earlier with kind of the 2 top options. But with Brock Bowers limited, he didn't pull his normal target share. Trey Tucker was a little bit more involved than normal. Kind of a wonky game. I don't know if I'm putting too much weight into this one, just because it was so obvious that Brock Bowers was limited with that knee injury.
Yeah, and Jacoby Myers, we know what he is, but we saw a clear rapport between Jacoby Myers and Geno Smith, and I think that's what you want to see. I think the biggest takeaway out of this, though, is for all the talk about Dante Thornton being the number 2 receiver here nominally or in practice, Trey Tucker played almost every single snap, and Trey Tucker had a touchdown in week 1, and he, like, right now looks like he's the number 2 wide receiver for them.
The last one that we are going to talk about here, Jeff, or no, I'm sorry, we've got 2 teams left in this bucket. The New York Jets, Garrett Wilson dominating with a 38% target share, just a little bit left over for Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis. Do you have more faith in this passing game if Tyrod Taylor is starting in week 3 than you would if it was Justin Fields?
No, I think the ceiling is still there for Justin Fields. And we saw the DJ Moore year a couple of years ago with Justin Fields, plus the rapport with Garrett Wilson. I feel better about Garrett Wilson with Justin Fields. I understand an argument about Tyrod Taylor being there, and Tyrod Taylor's been playable in fantasy when he's got an opportunity.
San Francisco 49ers, Ricky Pearsall to the back burner when Juwan Jennings was out there. I think there was a lot of hope. I know I was expecting Ricky Pearsall to just maintain the role that we saw in week 1, but Juwan Jennings comes out with 10 of the targets on a just slightly over 26% target share. Christian McCaffrey with 7, Ricky Pearsall with 6. Is this about what you expect going forward? Juwan Jennings being the wide receiver 1, Ricky Pearsall being the wide receiver 2, and Christian McCaffrey kind of nominally being 2nd or 3rd on the team in targets.
It is, unfortunately. I think that for people like us that were heavily invested in Ricky Pearsall and expecting that breakout, we've seen glimpses. It's been there. We saw 100 yards in week 1, but at the same time, I think comfort level on what Juwan Jennings brings to the offense, and then having Christian McCaffrey as well leaves Ricky Pearsall down the list a bit.
Time for the dirty offenses, Jeff. The ones that everybody's getting some touches, ball's getting spread all over the place. And the Atlanta Falcons are the first one that we're going to talk about here. I think had you, we talked about this earlier, we would have thought this was a very clean offense with all the looks going to Bijan Robinson, and which now Bijan Robinson, no longer Bijan Robinson. We'll get that fixed. Just as I started getting comfortable saying Bijan Robinson, now I have to go back to Bijan. But Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, all below a 25% target share. We saw Ray McLeod pretty involved. This is just it was a disappointing game overall when Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts are both out targeting Drake London. Not what we want to see, but wonder how much of that was him just still being limited by that shoulder injury.
Yeah, limited by the shoulder injury. And I mean, this was an ugly, messy game. And really, I think it was just JJ McCarthy was that bad. The Falcons basically said, as long as we don't lose this game, we're going to win this game, and they were just fine. I mean, the run game dominated. They had over 200 yards between Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson. So, and also there was a story during the game where he said, "I know I had this corrected video, and my mom wants it this way, but I like the way that people were saying it before." So I think that it's pretty open to interpretation at this point.
For the Buffalo Bills, we got Dalton Kincaid pulling 6 targets, Dawson Knox pulling 5, Josh Palmer pulling 3, and you might notice no mention of Khalil Shakir or Keon Coleman, who both kind of took a back seat in this offense. Jeff, this kind of is disappointing after what we saw in week 1, where it looked like Keon Coleman was really taking that step forward. Can you add some context as to what happened with Buffalo this week?
So prior to last year, when Vanderbilt beat Alabama, when Alabama would play Vanderbilt, the game would be over by the end of the first quarter, and this was a game that the game was felt over by the end of the first quarter. The Bills have the ability to do this too. Then they've done this for the past year at least. When they do play a bad team, they just blow them out and they nuke them. And there was just nothing in the second half. We saw Josh Allen busted his nose, and they really just kind of they would be playing the freshmen at the second half if this were a college game. And I'm not too concerned about it because Keon Coleman was heavily involved early. You're just going to have these games sometimes with the Bills playing at the level that they're playing that they can just nuke some of these bad teams.
The Carolina Panthers, we saw a ton of volume, 53 pass attempts in this game. I think it was 55 pass attempts, 53 targets. I'm not sure
55
exactly
pass
how you
attempts,
break this up.
53 targets.
Yes.
Yeah, so like a throwaway doesn't count as a target.
Right.
So that's your targets should never match your pass attempts. If you're doing
Right.
modeling out there, targets aren't going to match pass attempts.
Yeah, I learned that a few years ago. I reached out to JJ Zacharyson and I said, "Hey, I'm trying to build out some modeling here." And I realized my target share numbers don't match your target share numbers. And he said, "Well, yeah, your denominator isn't the pass attempts. Your denominator is the total team targets." So I see you are already doing that, Jeff. A very smart guy. No questions about that. Tedero McMillan, 10 targets. Hunter Renfrow, 9 targets. Jatavian Sanders, 9 targets. So what we see, like huge target numbers here, 10 targets, 9 targets, 9 targets, but 18%, 17%. I mean, there was just so much volume in this game. The ball was spread all over the place. So looking at the raw production here, you see 100 yards for Tedero McMillan. You see 2 touchdowns for Hunter Renfrow. That's really exciting. But if you look at, a normal game where they're throwing the ball 35 times and you marginally shave off that production a little bit, suddenly it's not quite as exciting. But either way, Tedero McMillan looks good. Hunter Renfrow is a full-time receiver. And then I think right now we're kind of Xavier Legette hoping he can turn things around. And until then, just kind of waiting for Jalen Coker to come join the team, right?
So Xavier Legette had 8 targets, so he was
Mm-hmm.
right there too, and that all serves in to lower the overall percentages. But I can't help but wonder if it's the type of thing where they tried very hard weeks 1 and weeks 2 to get Xavier Legette going, and in this comeback they realized maybe it's Hunter Renfrow as that guy
Yeah.
that we need here as the wide receiver 2. And we were talking pre-show, you're very bullish on Tedero McMillan, but you compared him to Mike Evans, and if you're looking at that as he's the Mike Evans that can attack you down the field and vertically, boy, that clears out a lot of space for Hunter Renfrow to just eat underneath. And so I think my biggest takeaway of this one is Hunter Renfrow in deep leagues, maybe even trending towards PPR shallow leagues.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching Hunter Renfrow here as the player that could emerge.
Yeah, and I picked him up in a lot of dynasty leagues this preseason, but like even in my redraft leagues right now, if I've got 7+ bench spots, I think Hunter Renfrow is worth a stash. We don't know. I mean, I almost wonder now if with how much Legette has struggled these last couple of weeks, is when Jalen Coker comes, do they just keep Hunter Renfrow where he is in the slot and just kind of run this rotation with Jalen Coker and Xavier Legette at flanker, which is certainly possible. I mean, Hunter Renfrow has looked good. He still looks like the player that he was when he was a top 12 wide receiver with the Raiders 2 years ago. So definitely still holding a torch for Hunter Renfrow.
Legette too is a guy that he really wears his heart on his sleeve, and I think the struggles are really getting to him because I saw a clip from late in this game where they were in scramble drill, everybody was lined up, and Legette was just kind of lackadaisically like getting back to the line of scrimmage, and that tells me that like it's he knows he had a big bad game, and that's really getting into his head a little bit.
The Cleveland Browns, we saw split up between Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Jerome Ford. Dylan Sampson had some targets as well. I mean, this ball is getting spread all over the place. We don't even talk about Harold Fannin and David Njoku because they weren't one of the top 3 targets, but we know this ball is getting spread all over the place. This one's just kind of a headache for fantasy purposes. I'm almost at the point where it's like Quinshon Judkins. I'm kind of excited about what he can look like, and everybody else, like even Jerry Jeudy, who we were kind of excited about in the preseason. Now these are all just kind of desperation flex plays.
Yeah, Joe Flacco's just not been bad. And
No.
I think that we were hoping that we saw glimpses with the Colts where there was passing volume with Flacco. We saw the magic to end 2023 with Flacco. It's not there at all. And we're getting the Joe Flacco that we understand why he was a backup for 7 years at this point. It's not allowing anything to blossom. You mentioned Dylan Sampson there, and I think it's important because Jerome Ford has led the team in running back snaps the last 2 weeks. Dylan Sampson was not involved in this game at all until the very end of the game when it was a big blowout. And I think that we talked about it last week in our running back episode that, there was so much talk about, well, Judkins coming back and then Dylan Sampson caught 8 balls and he's going to be the receiving back. And I said, well, wait a minute. Jerome Ford had the most snaps, and it looks like it's going to be a Jerome Ford, Quinshon Judkins backfield here with Ford handling passing downs as the protector and getting some passing volume. And Judkins, he got involved early heavily.
So we know PFF grades are a little bit subjective, but I just got to ask you, Jeff. There was one guy who far and away had the best grade for the Cleveland Browns this week. Do you know who it was?
Quinshon Judkins.
Dylan Gabriel. So you talk about the Joe Flacco struggles. We only saw Dylan Gabriel out there for a handful of plays, but he did look pretty sharp in those 3 dropbacks and a touchdown that he had. Dallas Cowboys, very, very, very dirty offense. Right now, Jake Ferguson is leading all tight ends in receptions. CeeDee Lamb getting 11 targets. George Pickens getting involved. We're seeing, Kevontae Turpin was involved, and then he got knocked out with a neck injury, which opened up the opportunity for Jalen Tolbert to come in and get some touches as well. Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders getting targets. I mean, they threw the ball 52 times in this game, and it was spread to just about everybody with a star on their jersey.
Yeah, and I think that if you were to look at this holistically, you see Dallas, you see Carolina popping down here with 50 plus attempt games and having some heavy volume and it's the type of thing of like for CeeDee Lamb to get 20 targets feels very difficult. But then if like the Cowboys are closer to like 30 attempts, then CeeDee Lamb could still be at 11 targets and the ratios just look different. Whereas if you look at the top there, you talk about the Eagles where, AJ Brown getting 8 targets on just barely 20 passing attempts, it pushes that ratio there. So it's a little bit screwy sometimes on where things might shake out.
The Indianapolis Colts are another one worth talking about. 33 pass attempts. Daniel Jones looked good again. Josh Downs, who was very much so an afterthought in week 1, led the team in targets with 8 in week 2. A little bit shocking to see that because he was still glued to the slot. He was still a part-time player. You saw a little uptick in snap share, but still not getting a lot of volume on the field, but was heavily targeted when he was out there. So, Jeff, what do you make of this one? Like I do my hits, misses, and maybes every single week. And one of my maybes this week was Josh Downs because I'm just kind of saying, I don't know if we have enough information to make any declarative statements on Josh Downs. Like between what we saw in week 1 and what we saw in week 2, I think you just kind of had to sit here and take a wait and see approach.
So I know Patrick Surtain was injured at one point in this game. I don't know if he came back or not. So I apologize for my ignorance there. But my assumption is that going into this, they basically wrote Michael Pittman off in the game plan as Surtain being on him and looked in other directions. And so that's where it opened up for Josh Downs. Alec Pierce led all wide receivers in snaps, and Tyler Warren still had a very strong game. I mean, Downs 8 targets, 6 catches, 51 yards. It's like 8.5, like 8.1 PPR or half PPR points. I think it was the product of Michael Pittman just knowing the matchup and planning for that difficult matchup.
Kansas City spread the ball pretty thinly. Travis Kelce was the target leader with 6, but we saw Marquise Brown with 5, Tyquan Thornton with 5, and we saw a lot of other guys getting involved there as well. This is just my assumption. This is what this offense is going to look like until Rashee Rice returns. Still don't really know what's going on with Xavier Worthy. They talked about how he might be ready for week 3. This one is going to change a lot, though, as injuries start to heal up and suspensions start to clear.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We're already 2 out of the 6 games for Rashee Rice, so that's nearing. And Worthy, there was the hope that he might play, but then you saw a clip of him at practice, and it was like his arm looked like it was like completely
A
immobilized,
mummy.
and it's like, how is this guy going to play football? But I think a healthy Worthy would be seeing heavy volume here, but we don't have a healthy Worthy. I mean, it's the Chiefs don't feel like they feel very good right now. Where they like
Mhm.
Patrick Mahomes for, I think that there was a lot of excitement about returning the vertical elements within this offense for Patrick Mahomes, and then it fizzled out, and it just like the body language doesn't look great for Patrick Mahomes right now. And maybe getting those pieces back in there will plug in there. But if they're not able to go deep, then Rashee Rice should be able to have a lot of volume on this. But I think Travis Kelsey, it's struggling for making some key mistakes, knocking out a teammate. He had a big fumble in this game, so I think there's
Also had
just a
that
lot of
drop at
frustration.
the goal line, like, where it's just like it's a catch that prime Travis Kelce makes 100 times out of 100 and scores
Yeah,
an easy touchdown on, and instead he just kinda, like, jumbled it in the air, went right to a defender, and that's, like, a
but that's
huge
what I'm talking about.
game-swinging play right there, yeah, so,
Yep.
Travis Kelce not looking like himself. Interesting nugget that I pulled, though, after week 2, Patrick Mahomes extrapolate his 17 games over his first 2, he's on pace for over 1,000 rushing yards, so, we'll see if that maintains, but, when the run game isn't working, the pass game isn't working, he's just kinda taking it himself and taking away with it. So the Los Angeles Chargers, Jeff, this one's weird to call it a dirty offense because we see a little dash of Omarion Hampton and Will Disley and the other tight ends getting involved as pass catchers, but the only three that matter here are Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen, and Lad McConkey. Let me ask you, Jeff, who do you think is the Chargers' leading receiver through week 2?
Quinn Johnston, baby, it's all
He
all
sure
it's all
is.
coming together.
Yeah, I mean, you
Now,
look at it like he's not far behind in targets either. Keenan Allen and Lad McConkey are tied for the target lead. Quentin Johnston is right behind them. I could just gush about this wide receiver trio. They are just three talented players with perfectly complementary skill sets. I love, my wife. We were watching this game yesterday. We're born and raised in Chicago, but we always there's kind of this joke, like an inside joke with Chicago fans that you need a second team because like if you just put all of your eggs in the Bears basket, you're just going to get crushed year after year. And that second team can change from time to time. Mine has been the Ravens for the last decade or so. My wife yesterday, as we were watching the game, she very heavily drafted a lot of Chargers players in her Scott Fishbowl league. She's got Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, and Omarion Hampton. And about halfway through the game, she proclaimed, I am now a Chargers fan. I am buying a jersey. I love this team. And I don't know how you can't. Like, it's just such a fun team to watch.
yeah, it's one of my camp teams, and as a extension, like I'm seen behind me, I'm a diehard Bills fan, but at the same time, the Chargers and the Falcons have a very special place in my heart of just covering them and the players on the team and everything. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of hand wringing around Lad McConkey relative to the other receivers breaking out, and but there was a wide open touchdown that Herbert missed McConkey on, and I think it's the type of thing. I don't long term concerns. I don't really have long term concerns on McConkey within this offense, but just Herbert's so good and he's playing at a high level. It's a little bit of the Josh Allen of it all, where
Mhm.
like I think that there was maybe some thought that Justin Herbert would have to lock on Lad McConkey because of the questions in the receiver room, but he's got such rapport with Keenan Allen, and we're seeing Quentin Johnson the development take place, and um, I think that the numbers are very early, so there can be some screwy things in the numbers. But I've seen some where like Quentin Johnson is viewed as the deep shot player because of his A dot and things like that. But he had one shot in this game, and he was involved a lot in like at the line of scrimmage, close to the line of
Right.
scrimmage. There, but the thing of it is you can use Lad McConkey and Quentin Johnston deep, or you can use them at the line of scrimmage. And we know Keenan Allen does the Keenan Allen things, and we know the rapport with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen. I think you're exactly right on hitting this on just being an offense that these three players complement each other so well. Justin Herbert's playing at such a high level that you're playing all of these options week to week. And as part of that, you might have down weeks, but then at the end of the year, we're going to look at it and say, if assuming health, we might have three 1,000 yard receivers here.
Yeah, and I think Lad McConkey too. Like I dug into this one and I was watching the film from this game because I was just really interested in what's going on with Los Angeles. Tuesday is kind of my like film review day where I go look into the situations that pique my interest. And this is one like I almost feel like Lad McConkey. I'm trying to think of who it was. Like I feel like those old Patriots teams, they always had like their specialist running backs. Like you had the pass catching guy, you had the goal line guy, and then you just had your between the twenties guy. And I feel like Lad McConkey is almost like that between the twenties guy. Like when they get to the short
Yes.
area of the field near the goal line, like that's where there's just this connection with Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert, and he's looking Keenan Allen's way. And while Lad McConkey can do the big plays and get behind defenses, Quentin Johnston does that a little bit better. So I think that this is one of those like weird situations where the season might end and Lad McConkey might have the most receiving yards, but Keenan Allen could have more touchdowns. Quentin Johnston can have more yards. Great player. I'm not trying to like besmirch Lad McConkey by any means, but relative to his draft costs, I think that he's going to come up pretty short of what his expectations were. And Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen are just smashing their values.
Well, and I think you're right there talking about the Patriots. And when you think about those historic offenses, they would have Wes Welker and he would get so much volume, but then you would have Rob Gronkowski that when you get into the
Right?
red zone, you're feeding Gronk. And some of it's just the size of guys and like Johnston's size and Allen being a longer receiver and giving you a better opportunity within the red zone. Whereas McConkey, some of the smaller receivers, it can be there's just not the space to get
Right.
open. And I think that the other part of it too is McConkey's so good at generating space and finding the area where it's open. But then at the same time, he's an exceptional athlete, but in the open field, he's not a burner. He's not going to be a Xavier Worthy that you're going to get the ball in his hands and he's just gone up the sideline. The angle's wrong. He's got a touchdown. He's going to get run down usually. So I think you're exactly right on when it comes down to the touchdowns. It could be a really frustrating season for Lad McConkey managers.
The New England Patriots, we're seeing quite a split here. Stephon Diggs and Ramondre Stevenson leading with 5 targets. Austin Hooper with 3 targets. And then, of course, Travion Henderson gets a little bit involved in the receiving game. Kayshon Boutte scores a touchdown on his lone target. Demario Douglas has a few targets as well. Dirty offense. I was very much so in on Boutte after the week one that he had. And I don't think a lot of people realize because he scored that touchdown, snap share dipped, only pulled the 1 target. This is one that, this is what Josh McDaniels does. Very similar to Sean Payton. He's going to reach deep into his personnel bag. He's going to change game plans on a week-to-week basis. And I think this is just going to end up being a headache of a wide receiver room to deal with.
Yeah, and I'd love somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I know they jumped out to a lead in this one, and I know that Boutte carried an injury into this game, and that touchdown that he had, he kind of came down on that shoulder. If that was
Mhm.
the injured shoulder, he definitely came down on his shoulder, and I know it was a shoulder that he was on the practice report about. I Part of me wonders if he didn't land kind of funny on that touchdown and that played into and also building a lead played into his being less involved than we saw out of week one. But part of me also wonders if, yeah, you're exactly right that we're just going to see rotations and different wide receivers playing in different situation. And Josh McDaniels is really going to look at it and say, I don't have a receiver. I've got a lot of receivers. So we'll try to play them in the best situations.
Pittsburgh Steelers, we got DK Metcalf pulling less than 20% of the targets. Kenneth Gainwell, Jalen Warren, everybody else getting involved as well. We saw Pat Fryermuth, we saw Johnny Smith, we saw a little dash of Calvin Austin. It's kind of funny as we're talking about all of these offenses. It's the ones you'd expect us to be talking about, the Josh McDaniels offenses, the Arthur Smith offenses. Do you think over the course of the season, DK Metcalf can pull more than a 25% target share? I think this is kind of in line with what to expect, like 18, 19, maybe 20%. It's just he's not a focal point in this offense the way that I think people had hoped he would be.
Yeah, I think that you're talking about hope there is a big part of it because we know last year with Aaron Rodgers and hyper targeting Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, we know the history with Devontae Adams. I think there was a hope that I definitely had that hope that DK Metcalf would basically be his Devontae Adams. When you look at the other targets that are here, Calvin Austin, worth noting that he was almost an every single down player. He's locked in that wide receiver 2 role. He is going to be boom or bust, and if they can connect on a big play. But yeah, Metcalf, as of right now, I'm really skeptical that the volume is going to be there beyond a 20% player or 25% at the absolute max. We just haven't seen it through 2 weeks. And I think the reality of it is when you look at DK Metcalf's skill set, I don't know that he's that type of player to be able to, and I don't know that Arthur Smith is doing the famous wide receiver screen to Devontae Adams where Aaron Rodgers would just hit him and let him go to work and those types of things
And
that
they
where
tried in
company
week
goes.
one, and he dropped one of those, and I think that was just like, well, that was probably something that showed up in camp, and they hoped that it would work in regular season, and it didn't. And they just said, okay, we're just going to pull that from the playbook. It's kind of if you're dropping slants, that's just not something that you
Yeah.
want to continue running.
We also know that Aaron Rodgers is famous for the receivers have to be on the same page as him, and this was just the second game between these two guys. There's definitely time where they could get on the same page, and we could see that flush out. I mean, it's the second game too, so we've got 2 data points instead of 1 data point, but trying to build the best picture for the rest of the season.
So, Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot right here, and you're a sharp guy, so I'm sure you'll be able to get this. I got some
I
trivia
don't know
for you.
about all that.
We got 4 wide receivers in the NFL right now have accounted for more than 50% of their team's air yard share. All right, so throwing a lot of numbers and metrics at you, but I'm pretty sure you're following. I'm going to give you the first 3, which are pretty obvious: Malik Neighbors, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson. Who do you think is number 4th?
Calvin
Number 4.
Austin,
Number
number
Calvin
4th.
Austin.
Number 4th, cat with a bullet, Calvin Austin.
It is Calvin Austin, has accounted for 52.4% of the Steelers' air yards so far. So had a quiet week, but still getting targeted downfield, seeing what we want there. Calvin Austin still, despite coming off of a bad game, still somebody that I'm buying into. And I think that if you can get him for a discount after that, bad week 2, a lot of people are going to say, well, week 1 was just a fluke. A talented player that I'm still buying. 2 teams left to discuss here. The Tennessee Titans spreading the ball very thin. We've got Calvin Ridley, Eric Iomenor, and Alec Iomenor and Chig Okonkwo, each getting 6 targets apiece. Calvin Ridley was slightly more efficient with his receptions. Iomenor caught a few more, but I mean, this is just kind of a mess. Can you see a world where Alec Iomenor ends up taking over Calvin Ridley as the wide receiver 1 in this offense, Jeff?
Yeah, I want to say no. I don't see that. But then at the same time, with Ailmanor and Cam Ward both being rookies, there might be
Yeah.
a little bit of rookie synergy there being on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these first 2 games were a really difficult debut for Cam Ward in this offense because we know the Denver defense. The Rams have an excellent defense too. They're really under the radar. The Rams defense is very, very good. And so I do think that taking away of, you've got the Patrick Surtain, Calvin Ridley matchup in week 1, plus a difficult Rams defense in week 2. And we'll see better days ahead for this Titans passing attack. And I think Calvin Ridley, I still firmly believe that he'll be the guy that'll get up to double-digit targets when we get to that point. But Ailmanor, I can't deny it. I pushed back on all summer long about why is this guy still going above when they took DK above him in the draft. But Ailmanor through 2 weeks has really established himself. And if he's available, I would be targeting him even in short bench leagues right now.
Yeah, had a really nice one-handed catch too. Like everybody saw the touchdown, but to set up that touchdown, had a really nice one-handed catch where he was just draped in coverage. So doing all the things that we want to see from him. Last one we're going to talk about here, Jeff, and this one qualifies as a dirty offense. And maybe I'm out of line by saying this, but I think this is one of the cleaner dirty offenses. We see Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and Zach Ertz each with above a 20% and below a 25% target share, but 9 targets for Terry McLaurin, 8 for Deebo Samuel, 8 for Zach Ertz. We're going to see those 3 kind of be in the offensive nucleus here. And, especially with Austin Eckler out of the picture now, he was getting some targets. They don't really have a pass catching running back. Jeremy McNichols, converted wide receiver. I think they want to limit how much they use him. Chase Edmonds is pretty good at catching out of the backfield, and he does have that history with Cliff Kingsbury, but we'll see if he's even active on game day. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, kind of a 0 in the pass catching game. We just haven't really seen him utilized so far. So when it comes to the pass catchers here, I think it's pretty obvious. It's Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz. Those are the guys you want to start, and anybody outside of that is just a desperation dart throw.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why the ratios worked out in this way is because they knew that defense they were facing against Green Bay, and they involved Eckler very early in the game plan, the scheme. I think the idea was let's get the ball out of Daniel's hands, let's give it to Eckler out here, and so that diluted it. But I think you're exactly right. The other part of it, I think, is getting Terry McLaurin up to speed after he missed so much
100%.
of camp. And early in the season, these guys tend to start a little bit slow. I think when they've missed that, Deebo Samuel is the big takeaway so far here
Wide receiver
because
6 right now in half PPR.
yeah,
Like he's just crushing.
and conceptually it makes so much sense because Terry McLaurin is excellent downfield vertical receiver. You're clearing out space. You don't have anybody in the passing game that is. You don't have Christian McCaffrey here taking Debo's role. You get allowed to allow Debo to be Debo's role.
And I did laugh a lot. I mean, I definitely, my immediate reaction was like, are they going to trade for a pass catching running back? Because you look historically, like over last year and this year, it's been very delineated where they've got the pass catching running back and they've got the rushing running back. And I was like looking like, dude, are they going to trade for Aaron Jones? Like all these different names thrown out there, and then it was just kind of had that like, they got Debo Samuel, like they've got one of the best pass catching running backs in the NFL on their team, like they can put him back there for a handful of snaps. So we'll see how this one shakes out. But Jeff, any other takeaways from this article before we wrap this one up?
No, I think just I think conceptually looking at some of these, they're really close to thresholds, and I think that that's an important takeaway. That I've tried to group them into buckets, but at the same time, there maybe one target here or there pushes into other buckets. And I think as the season goes along, my plan is to integrate kind of a 3 game to 5 game type of running window just to see where some things are moving or see where some things have happened with players out of the lineup. Right now, we've got 2 data points, and we're just trying to do our best to identify what's happened. I do think one takeaway, when I did this the first week, there was a lot more that fell into the highly concentrated bucket. And then in week 2, it got spread out a little bit more. And I think part of that is week 1, you're kind of coming in, you've got your key guy. Let's get that key guy involved. And then week 2, you start to get a little bit more comfortable with some of the other options, or defenses might target a little bit more on that one guy, and you try to involve some other pieces. So I think as the season goes along, because if you look through this, there's a lot of double-digit targets, and if you can do the math pretty easily, that if you're looking at a double-digit targets on 10 targets over 17 games, 170 targets, there were only 2 receivers last year that exceeded 157 targets. So some of that I think is going to get a little bit more diluted as we go on.
We also saw a lot of games this week that had 40 plus pass targets or team targets, a handful with 50 plus as well. So, I mean, this was just a lot of offensive firepower happening in the pass game this week. So, we'll see how this shakes out going into week 3. And what we'll do last week, if you didn't check it out, we did a week 1 deep dive on backfields. Today, we're kind of doing the deep dive on wide receiver rooms. What we'll do going forward for these Wednesday shows is keep it a little bit condensed, talk about some of the biggest changes, trends to notice, changes in backfields, changes in target shares. But of course, we kind of need a baseline before we can discuss those changes. So thanks to all the sickos that stuck through for an hour plus show. We know these typically struggle on YouTube, but appreciate anybody that made it to this point. I want to thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll be back with risers and fallers later this week. And then we'll also have the injury news and notes as we go through our matchup previews on Friday. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.